Now in this part, I'm going to look at research specifically, but I'm not going to be looking at your research. I'm going to be looking at it as a whole and how we might be able to improve the way we think about it and how we sell it to the public to get better levels of engagement. Now, I'd like to start with an idea that I first came across from the insect biologist E.O. Wilson. Now, I'm probably showing my age there because he was one of my heroes when I was at university. And one of his books, I think, is still a brilliant book, and it's called Consilience. Now, I'm not sure if everyone will have heard of the word consilience in the scientific parlance, so let me give you a quick definition of what it actually means. You will have heard of a body of work. So there is a body of work behind scientific ideas. If there is a body of work behind them, they're more likely to be probably closer to the truth than not. And what Wilson speculates in this book is that the more consilient something is, the more likely it is to be probably closer to the truth than other things that have not got many different disciplines looking at it from different perspectives. Now this is quite clever because if you look, probably the best example is evolution by natural selection, where the last time I looked at this in the literature was about a year ago, but there was 145 different disciplines had come to the same conclusion that the way animals and plants evolve is likely to be through evolution through natural selection as postulated by Wallace and Darwin, and that makes it more likely, in Wilson's way of thinking, to be true. So sometimes you've got to think about that when you're putting over a new idea. What is the body of work behind your thinking? What is the body of work that supports what you're doing? I'm not asking for lots and lots of references. What I'm asking for is who else, what other disciplines have been thinking about this over the years? Because the evidence is that people are more convinced if there's more groups of scientists or more groups of thinkers, maybe across the disciplines, thinking about what you've published. I think the other thing in the research domain that oftentimes is forgotten, and there are very few good examples of this in the media, and I don't think the public understand it, and that is actually the scientific method itself, the gold standard that we try to follow when we're doing our research. My first mentor in the business world did a PhD in fish biology. He was quite an unusual character, and he was a principal of university that I was working in. And he said to me, he said, the key thing in anything we do, Scott, is to make sure we own the methodology. And I think because it's been around for a while in the scientific community, I mean, I personally think it's the greatest invention ever in human history, but I think we take it for granted. And if you ask the average Joe in the street, what's the scientific method, what's the gold standard for the scientific investigations and applied curiosity, I would quite confidently posit that very few people have any idea how the scientific method works. And what's important about that is that we are not lone gun people. We don't work out there on our own. There are heretics in science, and we'll come back to those. They're interesting, and there's reasons why we need them. But we do live in this world where we have created a methodology to stop us fooling ourselves. And I think we need to engage the public more in that space to make sure they really understand how science polices itself via the scientific method. So how do you get into this space? How does your work become more consilient? Now this is speculation, but it comes from experience of working over the generations and working with different types of people in different environments, and it comes from an understanding that the way we think, it's called modularity, but it's about there are some ways of thinking that are easier than others, and once you've formed an idea or formed a perspective on something, it's actually quite difficult to change your mind. And the way the brain works is a bit like a Swiss Army knife. You know, you can take out whatever one of the tools, but you can only use one tool at a time. And we tend to take out the tool that we've used for many, many years, or the one we're most familiar with, or the one we've had the most success with. And I think in research, it's worth thinking about that and reframing it slightly. But let me take you back to my TEDx talk in Warwick. The thing about that really got to me wasn't the terrifying experience of standing on the red dot and speaking to 3,000 people. I mean, I'm a professional speaker. I mean, I was nervous, but it wasn't that daunting. It was okay. But the bit that really stuck with me was the dinner afterwards. They very kindly took us all, there was 18 of us, and they took us to a restaurant, and we all sat in there with our partners talking about how the day had gone. And some people had had a difficult time and others had a great time, and we were congratulating each other and consoling those that had a difficult one lady had a problem with her music, and it really let her down, so she was feeling quite low. So we were supporting each other, but we very quickly got into thinking about feedback. You know, how did it go? How was it for you? Did you understand what I was trying to talk about? At my table, now there was 18 of us plus our partners, but at my table I had the following. I had a nanobot expert, I had a sex therapist, I had a prison guard from California, and I had an opera singer. Now, as you can probably very quickly imagine, the feedback that I got was unbelievable. I mean, it was all these different perspectives from different types of brains, and they were saying, well, I agree with that. And I, at the time, if I'm absolutely honest, I mean, I was blown away by it, but I didn't get the value of it until later, and I'll explain how I got to that later on in this piece. But getting other people involved in what you're doing can shed light on the things that you have taken for granted, on these heuristic behaviours or these perspectives that you've had for a long time. Getting others involved can be really helpful. The other thing that's fascinating in this space is that when there's a researcher called Harris looked at Nobel Prize winners, and he looked at them across the generations, and he either interviewed them if they're still alive, or he researched them if they had passed. And he started to look, or his intention was to look for traits. You know, where did they get their ideas from? How did they come up with their novel idea that got them the Nobel Prize? And he found a couple of things that were quite surprising. Now, the data is not as powerful as I would like it to be, so take this with a pinch of salt, but there has been some other studies that are tending to support this as an idea. But fundamentally what he said was, in about half of the cases, so in about half of the people who had won a Nobel Prize, there was one thing that came down to it. There was one thing that differentiated them from everybody else. And that thing was luck. I was like, oh wow, what does that mean? And when he investigated it further, what happened was that in 50%, roughly 50% of cases, the person had the idea, they changed their mind or they came up with a new model when they encountered somebody who was not from their field. So they bumped into somebody, or they were at a conference, or they met someone in the laboratory, or they met someone in the library who said, hold on, I'm interested in that as well, let's have a discussion. And from that they got lucky, and that's where the new idea came from. Now, if that doesn't convince you to think about consilience, nothing will. So the key point to think about here is just to ask yourself a question. What are my blind spots? What am I not seeing in my research that another person might be able to see? Where is my Nobel Prize hiding? Okay, so let's go into a very practical example. Have you ever presented a poster at a scientific conference? Have you ever been given a really hard time at a scientific conference? Have you ever, had some really tough feedback? I have. I was involved in the Lockerbie disaster, and we were presenting at an anatomy conference, and this professor of anatomy came up to us, and he was not impressed at all about how we'd set up our research, and we had a very, very difficult experience. But that, I'm not going to talk about that, it's too personal. Let's come out of that, and let me try and explain and build on one of the themes that I've been developing from the start. So I'm going to tell you a story. It's another parable, and it's something that I think is extremely powerful. I want you to imagine you're living in a village, and that village is unique for one particular thing. Everyone in the village is blind. So it's a parable, but I want you to imagine what it'd be like. Everyone was blind. One day, an animal, again, comes into the village. The children, sensing the animal, run to the elders and say, please come, please come. And the 4 elders come out to see what has walked in to the village. The first elder stretches up at the back end here and says, it's long, thin thing with some fluffy stuff at the end. It's a broom. It's a broom. The second elder goes up to one of these round, tall things, and she puts her arms around it and taps it and says, "It feels like a tree." The third elder, you probably get where I'm going now, reaches up, and it's this huge expanse of hard, tall, it feels like stone, it's hard. She says, it's a wall. And then the final elder goes to the business end, and he feels this long, smooth, almost metallic feeling material with a sharp tip, and he says, I know what it is. It's a spear. Now, I know that's quite a funny little story, but none of those elders detected that they were dealing with an elephant. This is a classic piece. Again, it's in a beautiful children's book, my example here, but this is all about something that is currently being called, and I mean the naming is I know I said earlier, be cautious with labelling, but they call it cognitive diversity. What does that mean? Well, if I go back into the workplace again, one of the things I've seen many, many times is organisations being lost in themselves. I mean, I had my TEDx experience where I had all the feedback from all these different individuals. I said it earlier, but it sparked something off in me, and I thought, how can I apply that when I go back into organisations? So this is what I did. I was working with one of the biggest IT companies in the world, and they have about 80,000 employees all over most parts of the world. And it was a fairly mundane thing. I was asked to do some presentation skills over a 5-day period where I would teach the top 20 salespeople in the business how to pitch, how to present to venture capitalists, or how to pitch to customers. So we did that. We had a little process. We took them through that. But at the beginning, I told them that at the end of the event on day 5, there would be a dragon's den. And at that dragon's den, there would be me, there'd be chief executive, and we'd have some special guests. So off they went. They were very good, they were very diligent, and they prepared their presentations. And they all got ready to come into the dragon's den. And I was sat there with the chief executive. I mean, each one of them walked in on their own. They didn't come in, the others hadn't experienced what was going on. They all walked in. And sitting next to me and the chief executive were their children and their partners. Now, you have never seen so many senior executives from the corporate world change colour in such a quick time. But very, very quickly, you can guess what happened. They couldn't use an acronym without being asked, what does that acronym stand for? They couldn't use a word or a phrase that just didn't mean anything. You know, words like strategic imperative. You know, they were challenged by their children or by their partners to actually explain what that meant. Now, after being through that process, we had a huge improvement in our sales success in that organisation. Our sales team were much more focused on what people need to know rather than what they needed to say. It's a critical distinction. And one of the poets says, listening is like touching at a distance. And I think to be a really good communicator, to really get your research out there, you have to listen really carefully to what the public are saying and what the public are feeling, generally as well as specifically in your area of research. Now, it won't surprise you that this has been looked at before by the philosophers, and one of the philosophers calls this dialectical reasoning, and that suggests that an interlocutor is ideal if you want to challenge your thinking, much more effective than internal challenge. So get someone who disagrees with you to challenge you. An interlocutor will be better at challenging your hypothesis than you will be, because you're so close to what you're thinking about, they will see something in a different way. Now, at this point, I'm going to hand over to one of my friends, and this is a chap called Robert Zubrin. And Robert is a very famous space engineer. He's one of the guys behind Elon Musk's SpaceX. He's a strong proponent of us going to Mars, and he's a very, very, very good communicator of science. So in this short clip, I asked him how he thinks scientists could be better communicators and how they could get better engagement from fellow scientists and the public alike.
Well, it is, and I think it's an important challenge for people who are actively engaged in science to convey not just the facts, but the adventure, the excitement of it. If you convey the excitement and the adventure, then people will go and learn the facts.
Yeah.
You know, I think that the way science is taught, on one hand, it's a great success story. We graduate millions of scientists. But on the other hand, I think it could certainly be improved. And one of the things that I would introduce into science classes is debates. For instance, I mean, because real scientists are always in debate. Science is never settled. Okay. You know,
Never finished, is it? You never say, well, I'm finished with physics. We'll move on to biology now.
Right. Well, Viking landed on Mars, and there were 3 experiments that were for life detection that gave what could be interpreted as positive signals, and there's one that gave what would have to be interpreted as a negative signal. And the scientists debated each other as to, how to sort this out. I'd like to have a high school debate on that with different sides saying it discovered life, it proved there was no life. Then you come to grips with the matter. Okay. Instead of teaching the Big Bang, how about debating it? Because there's a lot of questions there. So what about this multiverse stuff? Okay, how about free will? These questions, these are grand questions. Okay, Darwin, natural selection is tautologically true. With things that don't work do get eliminated. But where do the creative innovations in evolution come from? Okay, and so if people debated them, if students debated them, they'd have an understanding of really come to grips with what science is all about.
Wow. So I think Robert is an interesting character, and I think what he's saying is really valid, and we do tend to have forgotten the great art that was debate. So I would like to see more of that, and I think that at an even higher level there would be entering more debate in the media with organisations, whether it's funding bodies or whatever it is. And I think through that we could really improve how we gradually learn to communicate better and engage deeper with the public. So to finish in this particular section, I think one of the things that will really help is if we can get more people involved in the so-called STEM subjects. Now, we've already heard Robert's view that we should be going to Mars, and I absolutely see the point of that, because if you look what happened when the lunar landings happened back in the 60s and 70s, there was a huge explosion of interest from students going into the STEM subjects. So I think that's a jolly good idea. Other things like sending a woman to the moon would definitely increase the number of people getting involved in STEM. So I'm all for that, and I think it would help everybody trying to improve and grow the level of interest and understanding of this in the scientific community. A couple of other things though that are worthy of mentioning. One of my heroes from a scientific perspective, and certainly from the communication of science perspective, is the late great Carl Sagan. Now, Sagan said back in the 80s that his greatest fear was that we'd be living in a society which was based on science and engineering, but such was the society's education system and the interest in science that no one would understand it. That has in some ways come to pass, so I do really think we have to think about how we increase the levels of people and numbers of people getting involved in science, and therefore increase public understanding of the scientific endeavour. The final thing though is something I think is a bit more challenging. We've seen a lot recently of activism around climate change, around racism, etc. in the media, and growing parts of society are becoming increasingly concerned with some of the things that are happening in the world. I think there's an opportunity there for scientists to become more activist based. I think there's an opportunity there for organisations to become more activist based. Now, I know that challenges funding streams, it can challenge some people's belief systems, but nevertheless, I think in terms of engaging people, if scientists and scientific departments, etc., got more interested and more engaged with what's going on in the wider world, I think more people would be drawn to it. So I think it's an opportunity that would build your opportunities for engaging with the public in science. So I'd like to introduce you to one of my friends now, and he's called Paul Ramos. Now, Paul has recently risen to some level of fame because of his work in Australia. So I'm going to ask Paul to tell the story himself, and then we're going to think about how he's got to that point and what tools and techniques he's used to achieve that. Over to you, Paul.
Hello, my name is Dr. Paul Ramos. I'm a veterinarian, specifically trained as a wildlife veterinarian. Did a residency in zoo medicine, and Scott asked me today to talk to you about communication, I think, about science and communication and how to sort of reach people in today's world. A little background about me. Up until very recently, I didn't really know how to communicate because the opportunities really weren't there. But I guess really quickly what happened is that in February, I went to Australia to help out with the bushfire response there in wildlife. And I brought along my camera and I told stories on TikTok. I posted a total of, I was there for 3 weeks. I posted a total of 45 times. 39 of those posts had an average of almost 45,000 views each. 3 of those in the 6 figures, and 3 of those went viral in the millions. And one of those even reached the, the nightly news in America, and some of the biggest social media and media outlets in the world, took hold of one of those images, and it really went gangbusters. And as a result, now in TikTok, I've gone from 12,000 to 150, now 180,000 followers in the matter of weeks to a couple months. That's what happened. Right, so that's kind of the background. That's my kind of view on this. We just need to stop being so self-conscious, just be people interacting with people, and then we're going to get things done. But we need to think more like marketers when we're in the real world, and less like scientists, because you're always a scientist, but we gotta stop acting so much like scientists. How do you do this? Well, I guess really quickly, it's about, you're gonna have to get out of your comfort zone and gain some new skills. This is the 21st century. You're gonna have to get that phone out. You're gonna have to get comfortable with a half a dozen main platforms now that the majority of the world is using. LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all those platforms really, really matter, because that's where everybody is. If you're not on those platforms and you're a scientist, in essence, you kind of don't matter in a way. Your message is not going anywhere. It's just sitting with you, and it's going to die with you. So get on those platforms, spend hours, many, many hours just watching how the successful videos play out. Sit with TikTok for 5 hours. Believe me, it's easy. And scroll through what works. And don't be thinking that TikTok's just for young teenagers, because it was like that 5 minutes ago. But I'm telling you, in 6 months, even now, everybody's going to be on it. So it's also about timing. If you want to kind of have an impact, like get in there early. It's like early real estate. I would say get into TikTok now, because it's the place to tell stories at the moment. The other ones, it's much more hard to gain traction and get an audience, and definitely not impossible, but it's really hard to get that organic growth, meaning growth without having to pay for advertising. So upload those platforms, play with them, understand them, become knowledgeable, experiment with them. Don't be self-conscious. If something doesn't work, who cares? At least you learned about it. Be present in the world. That's what this means. Get on those platforms, learn how to film. Just use your phone. Don't worry about lighting. Don't worry about sound. Everything there is on your phone. If you want to upscale and learn those skills, that's fantastic. That's really awesome. Then go for it. But don't let the lack of those things stop you, because that just slows you down. Just get your phone out and start today, and practice and play and learn, and then you'll grow, and then you will actually reach people. You will. That's what I'll have to say, is just start.
So social media, this is a hard one. Not everyone's comfortable with it. Not everyone enjoys using it. But as Paul said in his video, social media is where the public is at. So if you're serious about engaging with the public, you really need to think about social media. Now, in terms of which platforms to use, as Paul said, TikTok is the one that's growing at the fastest rate. But where ideas tend to sit, where debates tend to sit, is on Twitter. That might surprise you, because it's famous for being all Kardashians and bums. It's not. There's a lot of debate on there. Most academics are on there, so I'm sure many of you are already on there. But engaging your audience on there is a really important step in building your reputation as a scientist. So think about it. Do you know who your audience is, first of all? And if you do, get onto TikTok, get onto Facebook, get onto Twitter, and start to communicate with them. Now, I know Paul has got a particular perception of the scientific mindset. Let's listen to this.
The thing is that we can talk about all the facts and the figures and the data and all that, until we run out of breath, and all that matters. But all we're doing is we're talking to and amongst ourselves. The world continues to revolve despite what we're doing. Life continues to play out. Like, what we're doing as scientists is having no impact on the rest of the world if we're not sharing our worldview with others and changing their attitudes to have them come around to respecting, acknowledging nature and what we need to do to make this world a better place. So we need to get out of our silos, get out of our shells, and start interacting with people like people. I am just a person. I shared on my phone my personal experience with the rest of the world, and it went bonkers. And through that, I planted a seed where people started to care more about the fires in Australia. And maybe as a result, they'll think about what's happening around the world on the bigger scale. And it all starts with a teddy bear and a koala. Who would have thought? Science is not going to save the world. We as scientists, we know what the situation is. We know what we know, and we know what we don't know. We know the risks. We understand risk mitigation and all that important stuff. We use those facts and that information to make decisions on like an actionable policy level or a management level. But all that stuff that we know is not getting through to the public. And they're the ones who matter, because they're the ones who are going to really enact true change. What scientists need to do, I think, is stop talking like scientists. No one cares about your are not value. No one cares about your no one cares about your statistical significance or your species that you used or the caveats that you put in your conclusions. No one cares. What they do care about is how can I say this, Scott? You can edit this out. Because the problem nowadays, and probably has always been this way, is that when you're talking to somebody, especially if it's something about, if you're talking about facts and reasoning and logic and politics, you come up against a wall of ego. All of us have it, and now it's kind of like everybody's ego is on steroids, and you cannot get around that. So the moment you mention things like that, there's a roadblock and you're not going to get through. So stop talking to people as if they're another scientist. Start talking to people, I think, like people. If you want to get around that ego, because there's just no other way to get through to somebody, you got to go around it. You have to appeal to their humanity. You've got to talk to them like a person.
So how do you feel about that? How's your ego? Does your ego get in the way? Now, I know we all have an ego. We've all got an ego. And if your ego is holding you back as a scientist, that is not a good thing. So listen to what Paul said. You have to drop it and you have to think about your audience. And I'll come back to that later.
For example, if you want to move the ball and maybe change someone's mind about their attitudes about climate change, rather than throw a bunch of facts and figures and graphs at them, show them images without even mentioning the word climate change, without even talking about facts, but show them images of how it's actually impacting real people's life, and which even better is if the people look like them, then you're going to plant the seed within them, and they're going to start to question, themselves. Maybe I should listen to the science and scientists. Maybe I'm not wrong. And so, it's kind of like when someone pushes you, your natural reaction is just to push back. So we need to stop pushing people, even though that's even sort of, in some ways, the right thing to do. People just don't respond very well to that. So we need to step back, and we need to show them in a very subtle and respectful way our point of view, essentially. So yes, science has a very real role in terms of making this world a better place. There's no doubt about that. But it's not going to save it. Because of how connected we are today, what will save the world is marketing. What I mean by that is how we see the world and what we know and what we believe to be true or important, the actions we need to take. We need to market that to the general public for them to change their behavior, because they're the ones who are going to impact the industry leaders and politicians. And that's how you get true big-scale change.